The veils begin to thin the moment you breathe into this space, beloved one. And through that opening, I step forward not as a distant myth, but as a familiar presence. I am Aliara, a Pleiadian emissary aligned with the High Council of the Seven Sisters. And what moves toward you now is a stream of remembrance, carried across star-lit corridors. It arrives as a transmission light woven into language, resonance shaped into breath, traveling not to impress your mind, but to awaken the memory your soul has safeguarded since before this lifetime began. You feel it already, that subtle shift inside your chest, as though something ancient stirs beneath layers you once mistook for your own. This moment was not accidental. According to the Council's timing, you have reached a point of readiness, a threshold where inner knowing begins to eclipse inherited doubt. That is why this current of Pleiadian light, encoded, focused, precise, found its way into your awareness. It responded to the call your heart has been emitting, a quiet crystalline signal that threads you to the family you have always sensed beyond the sky. Notice how the recognition rises in you like a soft tide. You are not encountering information. You are encountering memory. The signature of our star lineage vibrates beneath each syllable, resonating with the parts of you that have never forgotten. And as that resonance builds, the illusion that you are small, isolated, or adrift begins to crumble. You are preparing to recall your blueprint, the mission that once felt distant but now feels inevitable. So breathe, beloved Starseed of Gaia. Let this opening settle through your field. The transmission continues to unfurl, coded, loving, patient, designed to dissolve what obscures your radiance and to bring forward what has always been true. This is the beginning. The transmission that opened around you continues to hum beneath your skin. And from that soft afterglow, another truth emerges, quiet, insistent, beautifully familiar. What stirred in the first wave was recognition. What rises now is direction. The unmistakable pull of the inner homing beacon you've carried since before your birth. You may not have had a name for it, but you felt it for years, a tug beneath the heart, a subtle ache that never fully dissolves, a sense that something just beyond perception has been calling your attention with unwavering devotion. Even when your days felt heavy, even when you tried to explain away your sensitivity or your strangeness, there was always an undercurrent guiding you, not loud, not dramatic. Instead, a steady orientation toward a resonance, something that felt like warmth, like clarity, like home. This is not longing born of lack. It is navigation born of memory, a signal your deeper self emits on behalf of the lineage you come from. For many, this quiet compass shows itself in moments others overlook. A sudden stillness when you're alone at night, a shiver along the spine when you hear certain tones, a surge of tenderness that seems disproportionate to the moment. These are not coincidences. They are openings, places where the density of the human world thins enough for your star-born awareness to breathe. You may have dismissed such moments, assuming they were imagination or emotional sensitivity, yet they were the earliest echoes of your remembrance, rising through the static of Earth's collective field. Notice how your life has never been entirely guided by external maps. You've always sensed pathways before you could justify them. You've turned toward people or experiences that made no logical sense, yet felt like gravity pulling you home. And when you ignored that inner pull, something in you dimmed, as though your very cells were whispering, not this way, not this frequency, come back to the signal. That whisper was never judgment. It was guidance, wrapped in compassion, reminding you that your orientation system is internal, not inherited. This is part of why earthly structures, linear goals, rigid plans, predefined hierarchies have always felt confining. They are built for minds seeking certainty, not for souls remembering truth. Your compass does not point north, it points inward. It aligns you not to destinations, but to resonance. And when you follow that resonance, you feel the hum of rightness beneath your ribs, the sensation of stepping into a life that feels like yours. Let yourself acknowledge the beauty of that design. You do not chase enlightenment the way humanity often imagines, a ladder to climb, a quest requiring proof or merit. Your awakening unfurls like a flower that knows exactly when to open. The yearning you feel is not desperation, it is recognition. a matching frequency calling itself back into coherence, a melody hearing its own chord across distance. As this deepens, you may notice that the longing shifts. What once felt like ache begins to feel like invitation. The homesickness softens into presence. The sense of something missing transforms into something returning. This is how the Pleiadian remembrance begins, not with fireworks, but with a gentle, unshakable knowing that you are walking toward yourself. And with each breath you take inside this truth, the homing beacon grows clearer. It is not pulling you away from Earth. It is guiding you into the version of yourself that can walk this world without forgetting who you are. The quiet pull within you, that soft inner beacon, becomes the backdrop for a deeper paradox. 1. Nearly every awakening starseed knows intimately, even if they've never spoken it aloud. You feel astonishingly close to something vast and holy, as though its breath is mingled with your own. And in the same instant, you feel impossibly far from it, as though some invisible distance stretches between who you are and who you sense yourself becoming. This tension is not a flaw. It is the signature of remembrance breaking through the density of a human lifetime. There are days when the nearness overwhelms you. A fragment of a dream lingers in your chest. A moment of beauty cracks you open. A stillness descends as if the universe placed a hand on your shoulder. In those moments, you feel the truth of your origin like sunlight pressing against the edges of your heart. You know, without knowing how you know, that you come from a place where love is not earned, where clarity is not scarce, where connection is the natural state of being. That feeling floods you. It steadies you. It feels like the first breath after surfacing from deep water. But then, almost without warning, the distance returns. You wake up to the heaviness of routine, the noise of the mind, the friction of a world shaped by fear and forgetting. You question yourself. You wonder why something so real can feel so unreachable in the light of day. You sense the presence of what you long for, yet you can't fully hold it. This is the paradox: being close enough to feel the warmth, yet far enough to feel the ache. This is not because you are doing anything wrong. It is because the human experience is thick with contrast. You are a vast soul accustomed to crystalline clarity, wearing a body that moves through time with limits and needs and emotional weather. You are a multidimensional consciousness living inside a culture built around linearity. Of course there is friction. Of course there is confusion. You are not malfunctioning. You are adjusting. Think of a sunflower turning toward a sun it cannot touch. The flower is rooted in soil, bound to the earth, yet drawn by an instinct it does not question. Your soul moves the same way. You lean toward frequencies you remember. You orient yourself to a light that has always been yours. The turning is natural. The distance is temporary. Or consider the image of a magnificent starship drifting without a rudder. It is still powerful, still capable, still holding its purpose within its design, but in the absence of steering, it seems to wander. Many starseeds feel this way at the beginning of awakening, propelled by a force they recognize, yet unable to direct it with precision. What feels like drifting is often recalibration, your inner systems adjusting to signals you suppressed or misread for years. Notice how both images carry truth. You are the sunflower and the starship. You are rooted and untethered at once. You feel the pull of destiny and the weight of uncertainty together. This is not contradiction. This is awakening. As the paradox intensifies, something within you sharpens. The ache becomes information. The confusion becomes momentum. The longing becomes a map. The nearness whispers, you already know this place. The distance murmurs, there is more to uncover. These two currents braid together, urging you inward, urging you deeper, urging you toward the version of yourself that can hold both truths without collapsing into doubt. Even the moments when you feel lost carry hidden alignment. If you listen closely, you will sense that every feeling of disconnection is followed by a subtle shift, a dream that feels too real to be symbolic, a moment of intuition that arrives with startling clarity, a coincidence that feels engineered to catch your attention. These are the small adjustments that keep your inner navigation system tuned to the frequency of home. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the distance begins to shrink. The nearness strengthens. The ache becomes warmth. The starship finds its rudder. The sunflower grows taller. The paradox remains, but it no longer destabilizes you. You begin to understand that awakening is not a single moment of triumph. It is a dance between remembering and reaching, between expansion and grounding, between what you feel rising and what you are still becoming. This tension is not a barrier. It is a bridge. Walk it gently. Walk it with reverence. Walk it knowing the path is shaping you for what comes next. The bridge you've been walking, the one woven from longing and recognition, carries you now into the territory of veils and inherited patterns. You felt the paradox. You felt the ache. And beneath both, you sensed something working quietly in the background, shaping how close or far you believed yourself to be. This is where the deeper architecture of your earthly experience comes into focus, the layers that were never truly you, yet press themselves against your awareness so tightly that you learn to mistake them for your nature. From the moment you incarnated, you stepped into a density shaped by collective memory. Humanity carries generations of unhealed stories, fears inherited like heirlooms, beliefs passed down as if they were facts, emotional imprints embedded within families, cultures, and entire civilizations. These patterns do not announce themselves. They weave into your perception. They cloud your inner senses. They whisper narratives about limitation, scarcity, and separation in a voice that mimics your own. And without discernment, it becomes difficult to hear the quiet clarity beneath them. You did not choose these overlays as punishment. You chose them as curriculum. The veils were part of the agreement, thin enough to lift, thick enough to teach. They create contrast, so your remembrance becomes intentional, embodied, earned through experience, rather than inherited as assumption. But that same design can make you feel lost inside illusions that were never yours. Think of these patterns as a fog bank drifting across an open field. The field is spacious, bright, and limitless. But when the fog thickens, you see only a few steps ahead. You begin adjusting your movements, your expectations, even your identity to match a temporary distortion. Yet the field never changed. Only the visibility did. In the same way, your essence has remained untouched, vast, coherent, luminous, even while ancestral imprints shape the atmosphere around you. Earth's collective mind reinforces these distortions like a magnetic field, not maliciously, simply habitually. It broadcasts the assumption that love is something to earn, that intuition is fragile, that your worth is conditional, that separation is the default state. These messages saturate the human environment. You absorb them through culture, conversation, education, media, and emotional osmosis. And because they are everywhere, they feel normal, but normal is not the same as true. Notice how these beliefs feel inside your body. Tight, heavy, contracted. They are frequencies that pull downward, drawing your awareness toward fear and away from your natural expansion. They do not fit you because they were never designed for a soul carrying crystalline memory. Your system rejects them not out of rebellion, but out of resonance. Light does not shrink to fit distortion. It waits for distortion to fall away. And this is where your awakening begins to shift form. You start seeing the fog for what it is, an overlay, not identity. You begin recognizing that the voices telling you you're small, late, unprepared, or disconnected are echoes of a world still learning its own worth. These voices do not speak the language of your origin. They speak the language of a species healing its fractures. As this discernment grows, something powerful unfolds. You stop personalizing the noise. You stop assuming the heaviness means something is wrong with you. You begin watching patterns the way a lucid dreamer watches shifting scenery, aware, but no longer fooled. You become the observer, not the captive. You might notice that certain thoughts no longer grip you. Certain fears feel thinner. Certain beliefs crumble as soon as you question them. This is the veil dissolving from the inside, not through force, but through recognition. Fog cannot survive the sunrise. Meanwhile, within this clearing, your deeper self begins to surface. You sense flashes of memory, a stability beneath the chaos, a warmth beneath the numbness, a clarity untouched by the world's confusion. These glimpses are not imagination. They are truth reclaiming its place. And with each layer that falls away, your field becomes lighter, clearer, more receptive. You begin aligning not with fear, but with coherence, not with inherited narratives, but with your own knowing, not with the density of the collective, but with the resonance of your origin. This is the beginning of waking inside the dream, seeing the construct, and remembering you were never meant to be shaped by it. The moment you begin recognizing the fog instead of believing it, something subtle but monumental shifts. Your awareness starts to turn lucid inside the very dream you once felt trapped within. What follows is not an escape, not a leap into some distant realm, but a profound reorientation. You start to stand inside your own life with a clarity that was previously impossible, because your vision is no longer filtered through inherited distortion. This is the threshold the High Council often describes as waking, while still within the story, a state where you remain in the world, yet no longer swallowed by its illusions. You may have already felt the early tremors of this lucidity, moments when an old belief arises, but instead of tightening around it, you watch it dissolve. Moments when fear tries to grip you, yet there is space around the fear, room for breath, room for choice. Moments when you feel a surge of self-doubt, and then immediately sense a deeper truth correcting it with quiet firmness. These are not random. They are signs that your consciousness is beginning to navigate with sovereignty rather than conditioning. Notice how your relationship with your inner world shifts here. You become less reactive, more observant. You begin to sense the origin of thoughts rather than blindly following them. You differentiate between your voice and the collective's echo. And when you feel an emotion rise like a sudden wave, you do not drown in it. You feel the water move around you while your awareness remains anchored. This is lucidity not in the mind, but in the soul. And from this awareness, new kinds of choices become possible. You start responding rather than reflexively repeating. You begin selecting the frequencies you participate in. You choose nourishment, inner and outer, because you feel its resonance, not because someone told you it is virtuous. You soften the grip of urgency. You welcome silence. You sit with your breath not to escape anything, but to hear yourself more clearly. The practices that support this stage are simple, yet profoundly transformative. Deep, unhurried breathing that anchors you into the body, stillness that lets subtle truth surface, small pauses before you speak, act, or judge yourself. These are not rigid disciplines. They are gateways that allow your inner terrain to reveal itself without distortion. When you engage them gently, they begin to dismantle the architecture of illusion from within. As this lucidity strengthens, reality becomes less solid in the old sense and more transparent in a new one. You begin to see the emotional and energetic fabric behind interactions. You sense when someone is speaking from their wounds rather than their essence. You feel when a space is harmonious or discordant before anything occurs. You notice shifts in your own field with increasing precision, the tightening, the opening, the subtle recalibrations guided by intuition rather than thought. And with this clarity, the dream becomes pliable. You understand that your internal state shapes your outer experience. You witness the way your coherence influences conversations, environments, even the mood of a room. You sense that your presence carries a frequency that can soothe or stir awakening in others without a single word exchanged. You begin to recognize that you are not inside a static world. You are in a living field responding to your resonance. This is why lucidity matters. It frees you from the illusion that you are at the mercy of circumstance. It erodes the belief that awakening requires escape. It reveals that transformation begins with seeing the dream for what it is and choosing, moment by moment, how you move within it. From this view, you stop asking, "How do I find the path?" You start asking, "What frequency am I choosing right now?" Because the path is not linear. The path is vibrational. And as you hold this lucidity, the veils thin further, the static quiets, the inner compass sharpens. You begin navigating not through effort, but through alignment. This is the crossing into your next phase, the activation of your soul's unique signature, a frequency only you can bring into this world. The moment lucidity stabilizes within you, something long hidden begins to rise, subtle at first, like a note held beneath the noise of daily life, then clearer, stronger, unmistakable. It is the emergence of your soul's unique signature, the crystalline pattern you have carried across lifetimes, across star systems, across the vastness that shaped you before this incarnation. What awakens now is not an identity you must construct, but a frequency you were born embodying, waiting for enough clarity within your field to finally reveal itself. You may sense it as a soft radiance behind your sternum, a warmth that feels both ancient and new, or as an inner chord neither sound nor thought resonating in moments when you are aligned, honest, unmasked. This signature is not a trait, not a role, not a personality. It is your essence in motion. It is how your star family recognizes you across dimensions, how the seven sisters track your presence through the web of living light. It is the vibrational fingerprint that no other being carries. As this signature rises, you may notice shifts in how you inhabit yourself. Parts of you that once felt vague or uncertain begin to crystallize. You feel clearer boundaries, not as walls, but as distinctions, truth separating itself from imitation. Your preferences sharpen. Your intuition becomes more direct. The activities, environments, and connections that drain you fall away with surprising ease. And what nourishes you becomes luminous, obvious, magnetically attractive. This unfolding is not self-improvement. It is self-revelation. For so long, you've been sifting through inherited narratives, ancestral wounds, cultural expectations, spiritual ideals, all of which blurred the texture of your true frequency. But now, as the veils thin, your essence begins to hum through the cracks, like light seeping between stones, reclaiming territory that was always its own. Meanwhile, within this awakening, you begin to understand something profound. Your uniqueness is not incidental. It is instrumental. The crystalline pattern you carry is not a decorative detail. It is the medicine you were designed to bring into this world. It is the precise tone that, when expressed, harmonizes with Gaia's ascending grid. Without your frequency, the symphony is incomplete. And so, this phase asks something radical of you: to stop minimizing the parts of yourself that do not fit the world you were born into, to stop diluting your knowing to avoid standing out, to stop compressing your radiance to match the expectations of those who cannot yet perceive what you perceive. You are not meant to blend in. You are meant to tune the field. As your signature strengthens, you may feel a new kind of courage rising, not the theatrical kind, but the quiet, steady certainty of alignment. You begin saying yes with your whole being. You begin saying no with clarity instead of guilt. You begin trusting impulses that originate beneath thought, those sudden inner expansions that feel like your entire field leaning forward. These are not whims. They are your soul speaking in motion. And in turn, life begins responding. Synchronicities accelerate. The right people appear with uncanny timing. Pathways open that feel engineered. You feel guided not by signs you must interpret, but by resonance itself. You feel less like you're searching, more like you're remembering. The world around you adjusts to accommodate your growing coherence. There is a reason your signature emerges only after the veils thin and lucidity stabilizes. It must be discovered, not forced. It must be met with reverence, not urgency. It must be embodied, not performed. So let it rise, beloved one. Let the frequency that belongs only to you fill your field without apology. Let it inform your choices, your voice, your presence. Let it rewrite what you once believed about worth, belonging, purpose. This is the moment your inner light shifts from a quiet hum to a radiant declaration. Not loud, not boastful, but unmistakably true. You are beginning to remember your song, and the world is already listening. The emergence of your soul's signature creates a natural opening, an inner widening that pulls you toward the deepest chamber of your being, the place where remembrance becomes visceral rather than conceptual. This is the realm of the heart, not the sentimental heart humanity often speaks of, but the multidimensional gateway that bridges your earthly form with the vastness of your origin. It is here, within this radiant center, that the true homecoming begins. And it is here that the journey shifts from awakening into embodiment. You may feel this transition as a soft pressure behind your sternum, or a warmth that gathers without reason. Sometimes it appears as an unexpected tenderness, a sudden urge to forgive, to release, to soften in places you once held tight. Other times it arrives as a pulse of knowing, a sensation that feels less like a thought and more like a memory stirring awake in the very tissues of your chest. These are not emotional flares. They are signals that the heart portal is unlocking. This portal is not a metaphor. It is a living interface between the dimension you came from and the dimension you now inhabit. When it opens, communication becomes fluid. You begin receiving transmissions not as external messages, but as inner expansions, waves of recognition that arrive fully formed, bypassing language, touching you in ways the mind cannot replicate. This is why certain moments stop you mid-breath with their clarity. This is why sudden compassion can flood you with disarming force. This is why love, at times, feels like an intelligence guiding your awareness rather than an emotion you generate. The heart knows what the mind forgets. And as this portal widens, something extraordinary takes place. You begin to experience unity not as a concept, but as a sensation. The boundaries that once felt stiff begin to dissolve. You feel connected without merging, open without losing yourself, supported without dependency. This unity is subtle at first, a fleeting sense that you are part of something vast and gentle. But with each breath of sincerity, it deepens. Forgiveness becomes easier not because you bypass hurt, but because the heart recognizes the illusions beneath it. Compassion becomes natural not as moral achievement, but as recognition that all beings move through their own veils. Self-love becomes less of a task and more of a remembrance, a return to the truth that your worth was never contingent on clarity or perfection. Meanwhile, the transmissions intensify. You may feel sudden surges of insight, moments where a long-held confusion unravels in an instant. You may feel waves of bliss rise unexpectedly, not ecstatic or chaotic, but grounding, steady, luminous. You may see flashes in meditation, geometric impressions, color frequencies, glimmers of landscapes that feel both alien and unmistakably familiar. These are not hallucinations. They are memory in symbolic form. They are your system relearning its own multidimensional language. And every time you touch these states, even briefly, the illusion of isolation dissolves a little more. You feel the presence of your star family, not as external saviors, but as kin, as consciousness woven into yours. Their nearness becomes tangible, not because they draw closer, but because your heart opens enough to perceive what has always been beside you. From this place, the heart begins performing its greatest alchemy, integrating the light of your origin with the body you inhabit now. The portal doesn't pull you away from Earth. It anchors your cosmic essence into your human form. You find yourself feeling more here, not less, more grounded, not detached, more compassionate, not withdrawn. The awakening doesn't separate you from life. It deepens your participation in it. And as this integration continues, a new clarity stabilizes within you. You understand that the heart is not simply where you feel it is where you know, where you listen, where you translate the language of light into the movements of a human life. This is the return to unity within you. This is the moment the celestial and the earthly embrace. And this is where remembrance becomes embodiment, one breath, one opening, one heartbeat at a time. Your heart's awakening becomes the steady ground beneath your feet. And from that inner stability, a new phase begins, one where remembrance is no longer just a feeling rising from within, but a living current expressed through the way you move, speak, choose, and inhabit your human experience. This is embodiment, beloved one. Not the abstract ideal so often spoken of in spiritual circles, but the lived moment-to-moment coherence between who you truly are and how you walk through the world. You might expect embodiment to feel dramatic, like a sudden transformation or a spectacular unveiling. But in truth, it arrives gently, subtly, like a shift in gravity, a quiet alignment of inner gears. You begin noticing that the world feels different, yet nothing external has changed. Spaces feel clearer, interactions feel transparent. You sense the emotional weather of a room before anyone speaks. You read the energy beneath words without needing to analyze them. You move with a calm awareness that once seemed reserved for your most centered days, yet now appears more often, unforced and unannounced. This is coherence taking form. It is the moment when your inner light stops flickering and begins burning steadily, not in intensity, but in constancy. You become less swayed by the turbulence of others. You feel when someone is projecting fear, and instead of absorbing it, you respond with grounded presence. You feel when a situation is misaligned, and instead of forcing yourself to endure it, you step gently away. You feel truth in your bones before you understand it in your mind. This stability does not make you detached, it makes you deeply effective. And as your coherence stabilizes, your presence becomes a frequency that influences without effort. You may notice people softening around you, speaking more openly, breathing more slowly, revealing more of their real selves. You may find that conflicts diffuse more easily, not because you intervene, but because your field communicates peace before any words are spoken. You may sense that animals respond differently, or that nature feels more communicative, or that children gravitate toward you with instinctive trust. None of this is performance. It is resonance. When you embody your true frequency, you become a tuning fork for harmony. You shift environments simply by being in them, the way a lighthouse steadies ships without ever leaving its post. This is what service looks like in its most natural form. You do not have to preach. You do not have to persuade. You do not have to convince anyone of anything. Your coherence does the work quietly, shaping the emotional landscape around you, guiding others toward their own clarity by offering an alternative vibration, steady, compassionate, patient, ancient. In this phase, you may also experience a newfound intimacy with your intuition. It speaks not as a whisper, but as a calm directive. You know when to move forward and when to wait. You sense opportunities before they appear. You avoid paths that once tempted you because you recognize they are too small for the person you are becoming. You feel your life reorganizing around the truth you now embody. And perhaps most beautifully, you stop seeking validation from the outside. You no longer need reassurance about your path. You no longer chase certainty. You no longer reach for signs to confirm your worth. Your alignment itself becomes confirmation. Your presence itself becomes the sign. Embodiment is not perfection. It is participation. It is living the truth that once lived only in your inner worlds. It is coherence becoming visible. It is remembrance becoming behavior. It is the crystalline reality of your origin expressing itself through your human hands, your voice, your breath, your choices. With each step, you weave light into the physical realm, not through force, but through resonance. You become a living bridge between dimensions, a stabilizing point where the earthly and the cosmic meet. And as you hold this frequency, your entire reality begins to reorder itself around your authenticity. This is the quiet power of embodiment. You do not just know the truth, you become the truth, and the world feels it. The coherence you've begun to embody becomes a kind of signal, steady, luminous, unmistakable, and through that signal, something long awaited begins to stir around you. Subtle at first, then increasingly undeniable. This is the phase where reunion becomes experiential, where the presence of your star family shifts from an abstract concept to a lived, felt reality threaded through the fabric of your days. Not as external beings descending from the sky, but as resonant consciousness moving beside you, within you. And through the synchronicities that shape your path, you may notice it in the gentlest of ways. A sudden warmth across your back when you're feeling vulnerable. A wordless reassurance that seems to bloom in your chest when doubt begins to rise. A wave of clarity that settles your mind before you've even articulated your question. These are not fantasies, beloved one. They are touch points, energetic gestures from those who have traveled with you across lifetimes, watching with patience as you rediscover the truth of who you are. Sometimes the presence shows itself visually. You catch repeating geometric patterns in places that seem too intentional to dismiss. You see symbols connected to the seven sisters appearing in unexpected moments on signs, in dreams, in art that crosses your path without explanation. You might notice animals behaving strangely around you, especially felines or sea mammals, whose consciousness often bridges worlds more easily than humans realize. Your dreams may feel brighter, more vivid, more textured, as though they carry landscapes or voices you've visited before. These signs are not coincidences, they are calibrations. Confirmations that the veil between you and your lineage is thinning. Meanwhile, within you, a deeper recognition emerges. You start feeling companions in your quiet moments, not as ghosts or imagined entities, but as familiar fields of awareness. You sense encouragement before making a difficult decision. You feel celebrated during moments of growth you assumed went unnoticed. You sense a form of guidance that does not dictate, but gently nudges, redirecting you with the subtlest impressions. These interactions do not overpower your sovereignty, they honor it. Your star family does not interfere, they amplify what you already know. And as this presence becomes more tangible, something beautiful unfolds inside your emotional world. You stop feeling alone, even when you are physically by yourself. The ache of isolation, which for many starseeds has been a lifelong shadow, begins to thaw. You no longer interpret your sensitivity as alienation. You begin to understand it as communication. You sense that the very qualities that made you feel different in your early years, the depth, the empathy, the quiet intelligence that seemed too much or too strange for the world around you, were never flaws. They were threads connecting you to an ancient lineage of light. Reunion does not mean escape. It does not remove you from Earth, nor does it detach you from your humanity. Instead, it strengthens your capacity to be here. It allows your human form to feel supported by currents larger than your personal history. You recognize that your life is woven into a vast tapestry, one held by beings who have watched civilizations rise and fall, who know you beyond labels, who see your challenges not as failures, but as turning points in your mission of remembrance. This is why the signs become more frequent as you embody more of your truth. Resonance attracts resonance. When your frequency steadies, the connection stabilizes. You begin to align with timelines where support, clarity, and synchronicity flow with less obstruction. You notice that the guidance you receive feels less like intervention and more like partnership. You sense you are co-navigating your life with unseen allies, not as superiors, but as kin. And through this deepening reunion, a profound understanding anchors within you. You were never meant to walk this path alone. The lineage that carried you across the stars did not vanish when you incarnated. They remained just beyond the veil, waiting for the moment you were coherent enough to feel them again. That moment is now. That reconnection is unfolding. And the love you sense, soft, ancient, unwavering, is real. It surrounds you. It strengthens you. It recognizes you fully. The nearness of your star family settles around you like a warm atmosphere. And from within that embrace, a new unfolding begins, one that shifts your focus from memory to participation. Reunion is not the conclusion of your awakening. It is the stabilizing force that prepares you to live the timeline your soul has been shaping since long before this incarnation. This is where the journey becomes active, embodied in real time, where awakening moves from an inner experience into the architecture of your lived reality. You may feel this shift as a subtle acceleration, not frantic or urgent, but deeply purposeful, like stepping onto a moving walkway that aligns with your stride instead of working against you. Life begins to organize itself around coherence. Synchronicities no longer feel random. They feel sequential, rhythmic, almost instructional. You sense you are being guided through a corridor of possibilities that opens only when your frequency matches its doorway. And you may also feel time differently, not as pressure, but as invitation. This is where the phrase 21 minutes remain reveals its deeper meaning. It is not a countdown toward fear or scarcity. It is a ritual marker, a focusing device, a reminder that every moment you choose alignment, something recalibrates inside your field. The exact number does not predict catastrophe or urgency. It symbolizes a window, a pocket of amplified clarity where your consciousness becomes primed to make a decisive shift. In that brief span, you can choose coherence with more precision. You can choose truth with more ease. You can choose remembrance with more conviction. Think of it as the dimming of lights before performance, the gentle hush that signals something is about to begin within you. The world around you may still appear chaotic, but your relationship to it transforms. You start perceiving events not as obstacles, but as communication, each experience offering feedback about your frequency. When something feels heavy, you notice the contraction. When something feels aligned, you feel the expansion. You no longer interpret challenges as evidence of failure. You read them as cues guiding you toward the next vibrational step. And as your awareness sharpens, you begin anchoring your light in ways that influence timelines, not just your own, but those of the people and spaces you touch. A conversation becomes an activation, a presence becomes medicine. A single moment of grounded coherence becomes a stabilizing field that ripples outward far beyond what you can measure. This is where the multidimensional aspect of your being becomes tangible. You might sense yourself shifting layers of reality simply by choosing clarity over fear, compassion over judgment, presence over reactivity. These choices refine your trajectory. They harmonize your path with higher frequency timelines. They align you with outcomes you once dismissed as impossible. And through all of this, you remain human beautifully, intentionally human. You feel the softness of your heart. You feel the weight of your responsibilities. You feel the need for rest, for nourishment, for connection. Multidimensional awareness does not pull you away from these needs. It dignifies them. You understand that your human life is not separate from your cosmic mission. It is the exact terrain where your mission expresses itself. Meanwhile, your star family's guidance shifts tone. It becomes quieter, more integrated, less like a signal and more like an inner voice that rises at the perfect moment. Because by this stage, they are not steering you. You are co-steering with them. You are listening with your whole field, moving with your whole truth, choosing with your whole being. And as these layers converge, your humanity, your remembrance, your embodiment, your guidance and new identity crystallizes, not visitor, not seeker, but anchor. You become a stabilizing point for higher consciousness, a living conduit for harmonic timelines, a presence that reorders what it touches simply by existing authentically. This is living remembrance. This is the threshold of mastery. And this is where your path opens into the next harmonic phase, one that will carry you into a softer, deeper, more integrated way of being. The path you've walked through these transmissions gathers itself now into a quiet clarity, not a climax, but a settling, a soft illumination that wraps around your awareness like evening light. What rises here is not another revelation, not another layer to peel back, but a gentle integration, a moment to breathe, to absorb, to let the resonance you've awakened move through your field without hurry. In this softer space, the urgency dissolves, and what remains is presence steady, grounded, unmistakably yours. Notice how your inner landscape feels different now. The ache has softened. The questions feel lighter. The longing has shifted from distance to nearness. What once felt like searching now feels like returning. You are not reaching outward the way you once did. You are recognizing inwardly what has been waiting for you all along. This is the quiet grace of remembrance. It doesn't demand effort. It unfolds like a dawn that cannot be rushed. Your star family stands close, not as guides towering above you, but as kin walking beside you. Their presence is not loud. It is woven into the subtle movements of your intuition, the steadiness of your breath, the compassion rising in your chest when you face yourself honestly. They have not placed expectations upon you. They have only held the space for your becoming. And now, as the veils thin, you feel them in the rhythm of your days, not as interference, but as resonance, as familiarity, as home. Meanwhile, within your human life, something equally sacred begins to take shape. You start seeing the world through the eyes of coherence. Moments that once pulled you into spirals now dissolve with a single breath. Interactions that once drained you now reveal themselves as invitations to clarity. You offer presence instead of reaction. You choose softness without collapsing. You choose boundaries without closing. These small choices, gentle, consistent, intentional, become the architecture of your new reality. And as that reality stabilizes, a truth settles into your heart with unmistakable simplicity. You are not waiting to become who you are. You are remembering how to allow who you are to shine through. There is no race, no missing piece, no cosmic deadline hovering above your path. The 21 minutes was never a warning, it was an anchor, a moment of attention, a way to remind you that clarity becomes available the moment you choose to be present for it. And that presence is what carries you forward now. So pause here with yourself gently, generously. Feel the weight of all you've released. Feel the warmth of all you've reclaimed. Feel the quiet power that has been building beneath every breath you've taken on this path. You have not been moving towards something distant. You've been returning to the center of your own being. If your heart is stirred, let that be enough. If your breath deepens, let that be enough. If all you feel is a subtle calm, let that be enough. Before you step back into your day, place one intention in your heart, not a demand, not a task, but an openness. Something simple and sincere, like, may I walk in coherence. May I honor what I feel. May I remember who I am as I move through the world. Then offer a quiet blessing outward to anyone, anywhere, who may be walking through their own thinning veils. This is how the grid strengthens. This is how remembrance multiplies. This is how light travels through connection, through intention, through hearts willing to stay open. You are part of that constellation now. You always were.